Community classroom with Michaels. We're so excited to be here today. My name is Allie W. I'm here from Yarnspirations to help with moderating the class today, and our fantastic host here, Caron from our design team, is here to teach you the triangular knit shawl. We're so excited to get started here today. We'll give you another minute or so to let everybody into the class. Again, my name is Allie. So if you have any questions throughout the class, feel free to just ask them in the chat, and I'll make sure that Caron gets those questions so that we can answer them. Let us know where you're from today, and yeah, we're excited to get started.
Yeah, thank you so much, Allison. So as you mentioned, today we're working on the Caron Cotton Cakes triangular knit shawl, which is worked up in Caron Cotton Cakes, which is a really great yarn. It's my favorite cotton yarn, I think. It's a nice blend of cotton and acrylic, so it's not too heavy. Yeah, I really love this yarn. And we're doing a pretty simple knit shawl that's sort of like an eyelet mesh stitch. So you do have to kind of keep track of your work a bit. It's not a totally mindless knit, but it's a really simple knit that knits a really great result. So I guess if you want to move to my hands now, maybe I can get started on this right away.
Awesome.
So for this, you need a few supplies. I have a slightly shorter needle than recommended because I won't be working up the whole shawl today. You need a US 7 or 4.5 millimeter needle. You'll need 2 balls of Caron Cotton Cakes and a stitch marker as well. So to begin, you're only casting on 1 stitch to start with, and it expands as you knit. So I'll just start by doing a slip knot here. And so you start doing increases right on your first row. And you're working all stitches obviously into this 1 stitch you have on the needle. So you knit 1, but don't drop that stitch off the needle. Yarn over, and then you'll knit 1 more. So now you have 3 stitches on your needle. And all of your wrong side rows are just purled stitches, which I love. I like having a little bit of a break after working a lace pattern. Okay, and so again, you're going to keep increasing. You're going to knit 1 for your 3rd row, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, and knit 1 to take you up to 5 stitches. I think triangular lace shawls are one of my absolute favorite things to knit. I always have at least 1 shawl on my needles at any given time. And so for your next row, you're going to be using your stitch marker here. So you'll knit 2, yarn over, and then place your marker to mark your center stitch. Oops, sorry, did I miss something? I forgot to knit 1 more, sorry. There's your center. Yarn over once more, and then knit 2. So all that stitch marker is doing is it's marking your center stitch. And you'll just slip that when you work your purl row. So again, all alternate rows, we're just purling. And just slip that marker, keep it in the same place in the stitches, just slip it to your other needle.
Hey, Catherine, we have a couple of questions here. I'm just wondering if maybe we could start from the beginning once more, if it wouldn't be too much trouble.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw a couple of comments to slow down, so I think starting from the beginning is a great idea. So to start again, you're only casting on one stitch, so all you really need to do is make a slip knot. And then you'll just pop that on your needle. And to work your first row, you're just working into that one stitch. And you're going to turn that one stitch into 3 stitches by knitting into this stitch, pulling up your loop, but not removing your stitch from your left needle. Keep it there. Yarn over, and then knit into that stitch once more. So now we have 3 stitches on our needle from that one original stitch. The trick there is just remember, after you knit it the first time, don't slip it from the needle. I'm seeing a lot of questions about what's going on, so I'm going to do that again. So slip knot, knit into that stitch once, but don't slide it off the left needle. Keep that on. Then bring your yarn around to the front, and that's going to create a yarn over, which will create an additional stitch. Then just knit into that one stitch, your first slip knot that you put on the needle, knit into it once more, but this time you slide it off. So now you've got 3 stitches. So you knit into this stitch, you did a yarn over, and then you knit into the same stitch again. Should I go over that one more time? I'm still seeing a lot of questions and requests to start over.
I think maybe one more time. And then for those who are still having trouble with some of the beginner level stitches, like a slip knot and knit and purl, I've dropped a link here in the chat. Last week we taught a knitting 101 class, and really if you want to do this shawl but you need kind of a refresher, it'd be great to go back and watch this knitting 101 class as well.
That's a great suggestion.
Awesome.
But I'll go through it slowly one more time. So again, start with a slip knot. And fasten that on your needle. So you have 1 stitch that you've cast on. You're just casting on that one. And what I like to do for this part too, to avoid it slipping off after you first knit it, I sometimes hold on to the tail of the yarn so that I remember not to drop that stitch off the needle after knitting into it once. So you'll work just a knit stitch, nothing fancy, but leave that stitch on your left needle. So now you have a stitch on your left needle and a stitch on your right needle. Your yarn should be at the back of your work. Bring it to the front. And then knit into that first stitch one more time for a total of 3 stitches. So a knit stitch, a yarn over, and a knit stitch, all in the same first starting stitch. Once you've done that little bit of setup, you're going to go to a wrong side row. And all the wrong side row is it's purling. So every wrong side row, you purl every stitch. So if this isn't ideal for a first project, if you're not comfortable with knitting and purling, you're better to start out with something that doesn't involve increases and decreases, because you do need to keep track of a changing amount of stitches. So it might be a bit overwhelming for a first project. But once you've, worked a couple of knit purl projects, you can definitely move on to this. And so for my third row, I'm knitting one, working the yarn over, so bringing that yarn around from the back to the front under the needle, knitting one, yarn over, and knit one. So now you've increased by 2 stitches for a total of 5 stitches on your needle. And since we're on a wrong side row now, I'm just going to purl all of these stitches. Okay, and this is the row. Now we're on row 5, where we'll add our stitch marker in, which is going to help us keep track of our work a little better. So we'll knit 2, yarn over, knit 1, pop our stitch marker there, one more yarn over, and knit 2. So now we're up to a total of 7 stitches. And you just slip your stitch marker in your purl row. You only need to really pay attention to where that stitch marker falls on your right side rows. Okay. All right, so row 7, which is very straightforward. Knit 2, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, 1, up to this point, it's pretty straightforward, the increases that you're working. And you get a bit of a break every other row because you're just purling. And just slipping that marker. So there's a little bit more action in the next row.
Hey, Catherine. Natalie wants to know why Why is there a marker?
Why is there a marker? That's a great question. So we'll see up in, I believe it's the 13th row, rather than spelling out a number of repeats to perform, we tell you to do the same set of actions to the marker. So using a marker means you don't have to count out 37 repeats of something or a really onerous number. It's just a bit of a shorthand, I guess, to make things simpler to keep track of.
Fantastic.
Okay, so I'm on row 9. So I've knit my first 2, I'll yarn over, and I'm going to knit 2 together. So if you've never done a knit 2 together, you just put your needle through 2 stitches instead of 1. It's basically the same action as knitting a stitch, you're just knitting 2 at the same time. Then a yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, 1, yarn over. Okay, and now we have another decrease to do, which is a slip, slip, knit. So the reason the decreases are different is because they lean in different directions. So when we specify a slip, slip, knit or a knit 2 together, it's to make them symmetrical. So to slip, slip, knit, it's exactly as it sounds. You slip your stitches to the needle without knitting them, and then knit them together through the back of the loop. Another yarn over, knit 2. And so for all of these rows, we provide a row count at the end, like the number of stitches you should have. And I have 15 stitches, so I'm on track. But I do see that my stitch marker has actually drifted, so I'll have to realign that. It can be a bit tricky with the yarn overs to keep your stitch marker in the correct orientation. You have to be a little bit more mindful of that than I've been. So all of these stitches, I'm just purling. I'm going to change the orientation of my marker. So again, this is a good first lace shawl to work on. It's not a great first project though. There's a little bit too much going on for an absolute beginner.
Just a reminder to everybody that the recording will be available tomorrow on michaels.com/classes. You can find this recording and the recording of every class. So if you're not able to follow along and you're just watching today, that's totally fine. You can come back to the class tomorrow. Natalie wants to know which colorway you're using. I feel like I might know that it's hydrangea, but I might be guessing.
Candied lavender.
Oh.
Yes. So we can see it's starting to come together a little bit now. And so your stitch marker should be marking this central spine right there. Because it's got yarn overs on either side of it, it can sometimes drift if you're not careful, so I'll have to replace that. But it's easy to figure out where it should be. It's supposed to fall just after this central stitch. Okay, so I'm on row 11 now. So I'll knit 2. Yarn over. Knit 2 together. And I'll do that twice. yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, and then I'm doing those slip, slip, knit decreases on the opposite side. Yarn over and knit the last 2. Okay, and I should have 19 stitches here. 9, 12, 18, 19, perfect. And then thankfully another purl robe where I get to relax for a minute. I see there's been a request for a crochet video, and I believe on Saturday it'll be Seema demonstrating a crochet pattern.
Yes. So right now we have knit classes on Thursdays, and we always have a crochet class on Saturdays. And usually they're usually pretty similar. So if you want a similar crochet shawl, join us Saturday. And you can find that class at michaels.com/online classes.
And we have a ton of great patterns in cotton cakes. There are lots of shawls, both knit and crochet. It's just such a great yarn for shawls. It's nice and light and airy, and the colorways are really amazing and vibrant.
I love the yardage on this yarn too. It's great. I am knitting a tank top right now.
Oh, very nice. Okay, so I'm now going to row 13, where I knit 2, yarn over, knit 2 together, and I keep doing that until 1 stitch before the center, so till the central 3 stitches. So to create this lace effect, essentially what I'm doing is I'm working yarn overs, but then I have to work a certain number of decreases as well to keep the stitch count from getting excessive. You don't want it to grow too fast. So I'm doing the yarn over, knit 2 together until the central 3. Then it's yarn over, knit 1, yarn over 1, yarn over, knit 1. Another yarn over, and I saw a question about the slipped decrease, so I'll show you that again. So you take each of the next 2 stitches and you're going to slip them like you're knitting them, but you don't work them. So you just slip, slip. Knit through the back of the loop and knit that together. Again. And knowing these 2 different types of decreases, they're directional decreases because they do lay in a certain orientation. That's really important for a knitter to have in their toolkit, especially if you get onto making sweaters later on. It creates such nice lines of shaping on like a raglan sweater to have your decreases mirrored. It just makes it look really nice. It's called fully fashioned shaping, and it really elevates the look of any garment mirroring those decreases. So I'm on my wrong side row, so I'm just purling. So as I mentioned earlier, lace shawls are one of my favorite things to knit. Let me know in the comments if you like knitting lace shawls. What's your favorite lace shawl pattern?
Oh, Sharvie says that this is her first lace knit shawl.
Well, that's amazing. And this is just such a great pattern for it, because once you've got this set up to this point, it becomes pretty easy to memorize the pattern, and it becomes really intuitive. And so I'm now just repeating that 13th row. So doing a yarn over and a knit two together along one side to the central 3 stitches. Working those even with yarn overs between. And then doing the mirror decrease on the other side. Okay, so I did at the center, it's just yarn over, knit 1 over those 3, and now I'm going to start doing my slipped decreases.
Cynthia, we are using size 7 needles today.
That's correct.
Awesome. And I do believe Catherine mentioned that she's just using a shorter pair of circulars today because she's only doing a small sample. But in the pattern, I believe it says you need a 29-inch pair of circulars.
Yeah, the only reason I've opted for shorter ones today is I'm already finding this cable unwieldy, so I can only imagine if I had double the length to reckon with on camera. So you can definitely, though, you can use a longer needle if you don't have a 29-inch for something like this. It doesn't matter if the needle's too long because you're not working it in the round. You're just working back and forth to accommodate the number of stitches you'll eventually have. And I see Sharvie's asking if you do have to have a circular needle, and I would say yes. Because by the end of it, you're going to have 100+ stitches, which would just be too challenging on a straight needle. Plus, as your shawl kind of blooms and expands, it's going to be forming a larger and larger triangular shape, which might be hard to manipulate on straight needles. And for me personally, I almost exclusively knit on circular needles. They're my favorite. Okay. So yeah, this is one of the reasons I love knitting lace, because it's kind of instant gratification. Like, that's already looking pretty cool. So I'm just repeating the 13th and 14th rows for the remainder of this project.
Belinda wants to know where your stitch marker went to.
My stitch marker went away for a bit. It was getting lost in my yarn overs, and I didn't want to fuss with it on camera. So if I left it in, which I'd probably put it back in if I were doing the full length, it should sit just beside your central spine there.
Awesome. Ariana wants to know if you'll be showing how to bind off the project.
I sure can.
Awesome.
Absolutely. If I were about the stitch marker, if I were a little better prepared, I probably would have used a locking stitch marker and actually marked my center stitch rather than marking beside it. And that way it wouldn't get mixed in with the yarn overs on the sides. So I'd actually just mark off the center stitch around like its throat rather than marking beside it. So since I don't have that marked right now, I am being mindful to pay attention to when I get to the middle 3. Because then I stop doing knit 2 together yarn over and I do 3 knit 1 yarn overs. So I'm not decreasing any stitches, I'm increasing here. Yeah, I see somebody's asking to see the finished shawl. Unfortunately, I don't have that with me. It's in our warehouse in Listowel, I think. All right, and I'm going on to a purl row. How much? Okay, I still have lots of time. I will show the bind off for this.
What are your biggest tips for doing a knit lace?
If it is a more complicated pattern, this is pretty straightforward, so I might not. I guess if you're a beginner, though, it might be a good idea. I use what are called lifelines in my lace knitting. So you basically, once you have a row that you know is perfect, you run a line of like crochet cotton or something very thin through that row. So that way, if you do screw up, as I often do with lace, you can rip back to that row knowing which row it was and you know that row was perfect. So that's my big thing. I think we have a tutorial on the Yarnspirations YouTube about how to do a lifeline. It's especially easy if you use interchangeable needles that have the little locking mechanism, and that way you can just run cotton through that when you're knitting. And it's just a way to know where to rip back to if you have to. Also for knitting lace, I know a lot of people are very chart averse. I certainly was at the beginning of my lace knitting career. Now I love me a lace knitting chart because it's a great visual representation of what your stitches should look like and how they're stacking on top of each other. I think lace is the skill set that's taught me how to read my actual work better than any other knitting technique. Because you can see, okay, 2 rows below, I did a central double decrease. I know I have to do one again on top of it, you know, like it becomes more intuitive and you understand how your work builds up over time. if that makes sense.
That definitely makes sense.
So I'm working that 13th row again.
So Sharpie has a question here about, she joined late, and I figured since we have time, maybe you could just cover the first steps again. I don't think we need you to pull it out, but if you could explain how when you go from cast on one stitch to then the first row says make 3 stitches.
Right. So if I were to do that first row again, let's say this is my first stitch, I've just cast on this one. You are knitting into it, pulling that loop through, but not dropping the loop off the left needle. You're going to do a yarn over to create 1 additional stitch by bringing that to the front. And so when you then knit through that stitch 1 more time and bring it through, you have 2 stitches that you knit and then 1 stitch that was created by that yarn over you did in between the 2 stitches. That's probably the trickiest technique in this shawl. So once you've done that first row, you should feel pretty confident. Okay. And so once you've established that, it becomes pretty easy to memorize this pattern. You've got a 2-stitch kind of, I guess to use the sewing term, you've got a 2-stitch selvage along the side. So you know you're knitting the first and last 2 stitches of every row. And then depending on where you are, you're either knitting 2 together and yarning over, knitting 1 and yarning over, or doing slip, slip, knit, yarn over. And that sounds like a lot to remember at the beginning, but once it's set up, it is really quite intuitive. And my biggest piece of advice, I think, for lace knitting is to just give it a try. Don't be too intimidated by it. I put off lace knitting for a long time because I thought it would be too complicated, and I definitely regret that. You don't have to start with a shawl, but even, you know, just a little lace dishcloth and like a feather and fan or an old shale stitch is a great place to start. Okay, so I'm on to just a purl row. Please don't hesitate to let me know if you have questions, though. I'll do my best to answer.
I am just taking a look to see if there were any questions in here that we missed throughout, but feel free to ask them again here. We'd be happy to help you. Sharpie had a question about pulling from the inside or out of the cake here.
This time I am working from the inside of the cake. Cake yarns are really perfect for that. And I found the end super easily and it was great. And of course I did it off camera. Every time I try to find an end on camera, it takes me half an hour and I look a little silly. The center of these cakes are really easy to find, so it's quite nice. It makes it a little more portable because you're not worried about your ball rolling around as you pull from the outside. I find now that even yarns that I buy like in balls, I won't use the ball form. I always use the ball winder to make a cake. It's my favorite way to work.
I think you can definitely pull from the outside though, kind of personal preference.
Yeah, 100%. All right. I really love how this is working up. I love this yarn. It's a great colorway. And one thing I can definitely say about cotton cakes is it's very forgiving. If you do have to rip back to fix work, it stays nice even after frogging. So I'm just doing those knit two together and yarn overs until I get to the center 3 stitches.
Hey, Barbara, just as a reminder, yes, you can definitely rewatch this class at any time. It will be available online tomorrow at michaels.com/classes. So please feel free to rewatch it. You'll be able to rewatch, slow it down, rewatch it to your heart's content. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know in chat, because we definitely still have some time to cover some before we wrap up. Yes, so this pattern was using a older version of cotton cakes, which were smaller. So you should actually be able to do this, this exact pattern with only one cake. That is a great question.
So for this pattern, when you're casting off, it's just a standard bind off that you're doing. I normally, after I knit something in lace, I usually block it. Do other people block their work? Let me know if you don't know what that is or how to do it. And so normally then, when I do finally cast off, if I know I'm going to be blocking out lace, I'll cast off using a larger needle just to give me a little bit more room to define those edges when I'm pinning it out on the blocking mat.
We just had a question. So another question about, I think really you kind of mentioned this before, but working from the inside versus the outside of the cake like this is really just about how managing the yarn for yourself.
Exactly. Yes, that's all it is.
Awesome. And then the yardage on this size cake is, oh goodness, let me switch over. Or Catherine can show us because she has it right there.
530 yards or 45 meters. So that's really good yardage.
Yep. So I think that one of the questions here, oh my goodness. Um, yeah, so you could really easily substitute a different yarn for the question here. It does not matter if it's cotton or acrylic. Cotton cakes here are really gorgeous, and I agree. I really love like the striping, and it's a super forgiving yarn. But you could definitely use whatever favorite yarn you've got hanging around in the stash.
I know people get hesitant about using cotton because you think of cotton yarn like it's dishcloth cotton. This is so nice. It's not, because it's got a bit of acrylic in there. It's not heavy. It keeps its shape. Um, I know when I started knitting, I was like a militant vegan, so I wouldn't knit with anything made from an animal. And I knit with a lot of cotton over time. And this is like the nicest cotton I think I've ever worked with.
So the question here about blocking, do you block work made with cotton or only with cotton or any type of yarn?
I'll block pretty well everything to a certain extent. Like if I am using natural fiber, I'll usually do like a full wet block. If I'm blocking acrylic, um, I'll do what one of my coworkers refers to as a bit of a steam and stretch. Like I don't necessarily get it thoroughly permeated with water. I'll just even out the stitches with a bit of steam. But for lace, especially if you're doing even a more elaborate pattern than this, blocking it really makes it pop. And so I can start binding off here. I only have size 7s here, but I would probably go up to an 8, even a 9. And I'm just going to start casting off by knitting 2 stitches and then pulling the first over the second. So that is my cast off method that I use for most things. You can also, rather than the pulling the loop over method, what you can do is you can knit 2 together across, slip that back on, knit 2 together, then move that stitch back. There are different ways that you can cast off. So they do provide they do give a slightly different visual effect. I prefer this method where you knit 2, pull 1 over, and then proceed like that all the way across. If you wanted to get,
Oh, we're back.
if you wanted to get really crazy, you could do a different type of border on this. Like you could do a picot border or something a little fancier. That would be really sharp. So yeah, if you were to block it out, the reason I'd go up a needle size is because this is pretty taut as it is. And if I wanted the lace to bloom a bit more when I blocked it, I'd want a little bit more give. I'm seeing a question about a crochet picot border. I would do a knit picot border on this if I were to do one. Um, which it's the same principle. You cast on more stitches while you're casting off. You can do it in both knit and crochet. Either would be great.
Dawn here has a question. She said she's never blocked a project before. Any suggestions or where she can learn more?
I mean, there are lots of tutorials on YouTube, so that would be my first resource. And you don't need a lot to block a project. I just have interlocking foam, like little kids' play mats that are about 3/4 of an inch thick, and T-pins. And so you just get the project a little bit wet. You arrange it on the foam mat as you would like it to look, kind of stretch it out, even out your stitches a bit as you're manipulating the fabric, and then you just pin it in place and let it dry. It's one way to make your work look a little bit more polished. Okay, so I'm almost at the end of my cast off here. So once I get down to one stitch on the needle, all I'll do is I'll cut my yarn and then just pull that last stitch through. And I now have the world's smallest shawl.
It's the perfect size for a Barbie.
So I don't know if there was anything anybody needed to see again. I know I've been through this setup a bunch of times. If there's anything else you'd like to see, I'm happy to demonstrate. Or if you have questions.
Let's see. I am going to switch to your face here just to see if we have any other questions come through right now. Feel free to let us know if you have any additional questions here before we wrap things up. Again, this recording will be available, michaels.com/classes. Ariana, do you weave in the tails?
Yes, yeah, you will weave those in once you're done. And since with the new put up of Caron cakes, it's a one ball project now, you only have 2 ends to weave in, which is amazing.
Awesome. I don't see any other questions coming through at the moment. So I think we're about ready to wrap things up. Thank you everybody for joining us. Again, we have a crochet class scheduled for Saturday, so feel free to sign up and sign up for other classes at michaels.com/online classes. You can see all the class listings that they have, wide variety of topics and subjects if you want to expand your crafting range. But thank you so much for today, Catherine, and we had so much fun. Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.